Okay, don't do that.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
All right, we're back.
We're back.
We're less than a week away from not having any more of these obnoxious commercials and hate and lie and man, I'm so ready for this election to be over. I've had it.
Well, it's
just
a few
I'm
days
so.
away.
My home group doesn't take a stance officially on the election, so.
That means we don't have to talk about it.
Yeah, so probably nobody wants to hear about it anyway. But I'm going to throw this out. So we all do the same thing. So we're all realtors. So I think if you look at the election and what's best or not best for our industry, make sure you keep that in mind when you go vote. I will say this. I think the Switzerland answer to this is I think as far as the market's concerned, it's my opinion that if Trump gets reelected, I think the market will stay, it won't get as crazy, only because people are going to be like, well, we know what it's been for 4 years and now we know what it's going to be. If Biden gets elected, I think people are going to be scared to think, well, what's going to happen? So I think there's some familiarity with one and some, maybe fear with the other one. I'm not saying go vote for anybody. It's just my opinion that could be have an effect on our business. But
historically, though, the stats are interesting. If you go back and Google what's happened with housing market with every election and seeing what's actually happened, there's some slowdown just before, and it goes back to it spikes after the election because people are like done with the what if. And then we've never had any historical data where we've had market crashes or anything like that because of the elections. So it's all people's feelings or pent up feelings.
So the one thing is if the election could cause maybe some fear, maybe it may slow it down a little bit, which might not be such a bad thing, because what if we actually had a month-long slowdown and that inventory kept coming and we got our inventory numbers up? Could end up being a good thing.
Sure.
And again, this is we're not pushing any candidate or anything, but this is, it's a subject that everybody that's in our business should definitely be aware of. So maybe we should introduce everybody.
I know, Johnny, last week you guys said that Jennifer Aniston was going to be here today, but we have these two amazing guys today, so we're sorry that she couldn't make the show.
Well, Jennifer called and said, do you mind if Steve comes instead? And we're like, well, of course. And then Brad Pitt was supposed to be here, and you got his spot.
I'm no Brad Pitt, but that's all right. I'm happy to be here.
Me neither. So anyway, this is Ryan Peart from Advantage Home Inspections. And everybody knows Steve Valentine with the Valentine Group. Today we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to talk about a lot of things, but the home inspection is important to all of us. Here's the thing, so whether you've been doing it for a long time or you're new at it, inspections can make or break deals. So we're always learning, everybody's always, no matter how long you've been doing real estate, if you're not learning something every day, you're just not trying, because we all learn every day. And here's a guy that does, man, I don't know how much business you do, but if I could just have a portion of that amount, I'd be a pretty happy guy. So, and I can't grow a beard like that either. So, anyway.
We can all agree that the home inspector is such a critical part, and having a good home inspector makes a difference. So, and we've had good ones, we've had bad ones, so we're actually excited to pick your brain today, and we've got a bunch of questions for you. So,
and as usual, if you have any questions, just ask them on the page here, and they'll come to us, and we'll be glad to.
Hey, look, there we are.
No, that's last week's.
Oh, that's last week.
It's haven't buffered you in yet. All right, home inspections.
Yeah.
First, let's talk about you. How long have you been in the Valley? How'd you get into home inspections? Did you have a career in music or porn or anything before this? Tell us a little bit about you.
None of the no music. And, no, I've been in the Valley for over 20 years. I hate to admit it, but I am a California transplant, but not looking back. But my background is in commercial real estate and development. Did that for about 10 years, and also in kind of the corporate side of things with corporate IT and some other things. But been with Advantage for a couple of years now, and as the operations manager and also a licensed inspector. So I'm the guy that you get to talk to as it relates to, if there's a complaint, which thank goodness we don't have very many, but if there's questions from an agent or a buyer, I'm typically the guy that will handle that. So.
Talk a little bit about complaints. What kind of, maybe that's something that we can talk about and somebody can learn a lesson from somebody else's mistake.
Absolutely, and I, like you said, we're always learning. When I think I've seen a lot, and something new pops up.
Just when you thought you saw it all.
But I think a lot of what we see, especially in this market right now, is these buyers have so much on their plate when it comes to timing and moving or the mortgage or whatever it is. There's a lot of plates moving, and so a lot of times that report comes through, and they may not take the time to fully explore it and look at, okay, I may need to get an electrician out there, I may need to get an HVAC guy or a roofer to look at this, and not that we ever want to be the deal killer, but we also want to make sure they're informed with what they're getting, and there's obviously sellers that are saying, hey, I'm not fixing a dang thing, and we have to deal with that.
It's such a fine line, though.
Right.
I had an inspector my first year in the business, and the inspector comes out and in his own way pretty much told these people that their children were going to die because the roof was going to cave in on them. And I'm like, really? I get it. You're the expert.
Yeah.
But really, if there's a problem with the roof, maybe you should tell us about
Right.
it. But not picture your kids maimed from this roof falling on. It's like, seriously.
Well, it truly is a way to explain the inspection report in a way that they can understand and not be so fearful of the inspection report, because there's a lot of times, and I know you have great experience with this, but where there's a list of 30 things, right? And then that makes them go, oh my God, there's so much going on with this house. But probably 20 of those things are such an easy, simple fix. They're not something that's truly gonna make or break buying the house.
It's all in presentation and delivery, and Advantage has always done an amazing job, because they, I have a very long history with Advantage. Put it this way, Dave Schwartz, the owner, when he first started the company 20 some odd years ago, I met Dave as he fell through the ceiling of an attic into the carport during an inspection.
Hi!
What an introduction, right?
But he and Travis were friends of my dad's from ministry and church and things like that. And when Dave started, that was where I started, was with Dave when Dave was doing inspections, and I've used probably all the inspectors over Advantage, and it's always the presentation when it comes down to the repairs and making people feel comfortable, or hey, we do need to get somebody else to check, because they know where their limits are. They're not the HVAC guy, they're not the plumber, they're not the electrician. It's the CYA thing of, hey, this is what I see, this might be a problem, it might not be a problem, but you want to have somebody else really come in and check it, or they might not be as concerned with it. So I really think it comes down to the presentation with the inspector. We've all had inspectors present, and you're like, oh my gosh. Thank God inspectors are licensed now.
Yeah.
Because back in the day, they were terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, so, and I think it's a realtor's responsibility to have a conversation with their buyers and set expectations. It's simple for me. I always tell our buyers, I said, look, it's not a brand new house. So there's going to be 4 things we're concerned with: the roof, the AC, the electrical, and the plumbing. Outside of that, if a door doesn't close perfect, or an outlet doesn't work, or some minor things, we got to take into consideration that the house is 20 years old and you're going to find these. So basically, what the inspection report is, barring that there's no major issues on it, it's a honey-do list. It's your honey-do list for after you close. Okay, I gotta fix that.
I think what's interesting about the honey-do list is that if you went back and actually looked at people's inspections, and after they closed, how much of it they actually went back and fixed, it's very little. I can tell you all the homes that we bought and their reports, like, we've very rarely gone back and fixed something unless it was truly broken. Back to the presentation thing, though, I think as an agent, I think a really important thing to do when you already know your clients, you know their personalities. So one thing about Advantage is they've got several different inspectors, and they all have different personalities. Some are dry, some are humorous, some take more seriously. But I think it is important to talk to different inspectors and feel out their personalities and understand the personality of your client, because connecting the dots makes a big difference in how it's going to come across.
Is that something people can do with Advantage? Can they request an inspector for certain homes?
Oh, absolutely.
To match to their
Yeah,
buyers?
and we have a team of 22 inspectors. So, when it comes down to personality, like Steve said, or just whatever that interface is with the client, there are certain inspectors that mesh well with your buyer, and that's ultimately what we want and what we hope for. So
Flavor of the month over there.
Yeah,
Flavor of the day.
And not only that, but that our team allows us to in times like we've had in the last 6 months, even year, we have availability that maybe some other companies don't have because of our team and their ability to get out next day or whatever it may be. So we feel pretty confident that.
So does Advantage do not only the home inspection but termite and pool as well?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
That actually leads right into a good question. So, but before that, I just wanted to point out that the realtor should have a good relationship with the inspection company, not just hire an inspection company. I think they need to be really familiar.
absolutely relationship there,
yeah.
no doubt.
But that leads right into a question. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the type of warranties and things that Advantage offers.
Yeah, thanks. We do offer some things that very few companies here in the Valley offer, and we do have some warranties. We have a 90-day warranty that is a zero deductible policy that kicks in on if in the event that our inspector missed something in the report, that 90-day warranty would kick in and is in some cases supplemental to the home warranty that they may get through the transaction. So we have a 90-day warranty. We have a structural warranty, a roof warranty as well, and sorry, I think of the next one. There's also a sewer guard warranty as well. So between all of those, and they're on our website, you can check them out, see kind of all the details on them. But thank goodness, we have that as an extra layer. They're free of charge. There's no extra premium to have those as part of the inspection. They come with every inspection that we do. So we feel it's a great offering, and in the years that I've been doing it, I can count, on maybe one hand, maybe two, where those warranties have kicked in. But it's one of those things that makes the homeowner feel like, hey, we do get those calls where they may feel like, well, what if the inspector missed something? What happens then? And that's kind of where I come in and have that conversation with them to give them assurance.
So you're actually warranting the operations of the house based on if maybe your inspector missed something?
Yeah. So if
I've never heard of that. That's
yeah, I'll give you an example. If you had a kitchen sink and the faucet was in good working condition at the time of the inspection, they move into the home and it starts leaking. Let's say that's an example. They can submit that claim as part of the 90-day warranty, and that would be covered. But if it's something that we noted in the report as an issue or needed attention or needed repair, obviously that would not be covered. Our warranty company looks at the inspection report, reviews it, and says, hey, we advised you that this needed to be addressed prior to closing, and it wasn't, or maybe maybe it was, and then we can go from there. But it's a great process.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I was just so does the warranty plan, and I don't know if this is something agents will ask. Let's say, I'm going to give another example. AC's working at time of inspection, but day of movement it's not.
Yeah. So once again, if we in the report itself, if the AC checked out, let's say the temperature splits were good, and we did not make any recommendations related to the HVAC, and they moved in, then yeah, that would be covered. And obviously, just like any other warranty, whether it's a home warranty, that you would get for the year, there are some fine print things. But like I said, you're free to go on the website, see kind of what that looks like. And I've seen those claims paid out, several times. So.
And do you have like an inside handyman that takes care of that, or do you have contractors that?
No, it's a third party company that administers all of the warranty. It's not Advantage, and typically they have their process of going about getting estimates or quotes, or sometimes they'll have
Just like a home warranty.
Yeah, just like a home warranty. And so sometimes they'll have their contractors, but other times it's just a matter of them getting a couple bids and saying, here's the repair bill. Here it was $400, and they get that process. So
let me ask this question: How frustrating is it that some realtors don't take the time to learn a little bit about what it is that you guys do so that they can help through the process? Is that a point of frustration for you?
it can happen, and I've seen it, and I think in some.
This is all about being real straight.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And
Well, in that case, let me
let me tell you what's really going on out there.
Son of a...
No, I think with everything you have, like yourself, you guys have been doing it forever. Like you said, what to look for. What are maybe some of those big ticket items? There's certain agents that don't necessarily have those conversations with their buyers, right? And they leave it to the buyer entirely. And sometimes in those situations, if the agent removes themselves from the inspection process, that's typically where we'll see a call come through and a buyer being frustrated because they didn't quite understand that, I should have had this addressed during my inspection period, or I should have gotten a credit for it, or negotiated something, or even had somebody to look at it, to give me an idea of what the repair would be.
So I'm going to go right back to what I always say: knowledge is power. And any realtor that doesn't take the time to educate themselves on the process of an inspection, you just lost that client down the road. Because if you're not there, if they chose you for a reason, if you're not a source of information or a source of resource, you're not getting a referral.
Well,
You're gonna be looking
it's a
for later.
disservice to our profession if you're not doing
Absolutely.
that, because
No
you
doubt.
really need to understand all facets of real estate. You need to be, we talk about power partners all the time, how important it is. So you really need to know your power partners and everything about their business so that you can help explain it to your clients. So,
Let me give you a great example that happened this week. I have clients that just bought a home they're from Omaha, and this guy could fix anything. So we're going through the report. He goes, Johnny, it's a $5 screw. It's a $15 GFCI. I can change that myself. But when it came to the pool, he was in the dark. He's like, I don't know jack about pools. Tell me more about this pool. And the inspection report suggested draining the pool and refilling it. He's like, what's that going to cost me? So all of a sudden, here's a guy that knows what he's doing. He knows his way around one end of the toolbox to the other. And now he's like a little bit in the dark. So it took some time for me to say, yeah, look, here's what it is about pools. And then the inspector took the time to say, yeah, let me cover that a little more for you.
Yeah.
That's so important.
No, I think it goes back to knowing your buyer, and we see that. I get those calls where, especially right now, and historically, we've seen these out-of-state buyers that are familiar with an inspection process in their home state versus Arizona, or even the way the transaction works. It may be a little different in California or Nebraska, or hey, I never had a pool before. What do we do here? And so.
I mean, they ask for a radon test.
And there are those that ask for radon tests. We
Steam inspection.
Yeah. And there are, that does bring up a good question. There are pockets here in the valley that you guys know, I'm sure that we have found radon, and so it's a service that we offer, but not widely used. But there are out-of-state buyers that you could tell them all day long that the likelihood is we're not going to find it. But if that makes you feel more comfortable, then great, we can do that for you.
So tell me a little bit about how Advantage can be a resource for realtors that may not be in the inspection process, but how they can learn prior to and maybe educate themselves on how this works. I mean, is there a report they can have somebody go through with them, or how does that work with you guys?
I think we've done
That'd be a rep thing, or?
Yeah, I mean, there's always,
Lisa Vandenberg is hiding over here. She's our rep, and she does a great job. So
Yeah.
we'll bring her in.
Yeah, and our reps are awesome. We're covered in every part of the valley here, and if it's something specifically technically related that may need to go to an inspector, that can come through me as the operations manager, and then ultimately up to David, who's been doing this for 32 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so
That's the new guy.
Yeah, the new guy. Yeah, David. He's the one that fell through the roof.
Old guy, not
Yeah,
the new guy.
yeah. We got to give him a hard
I
time.
bet he learned from falling through that
Yeah.
roof. I bet he didn't do that again. Maybe not.
Yeah, maybe not. I would say our website's a great place to start. I mean, there's a lot of videos that are informational, just kind of even text and steps and different aspects of the inspection that I think are critical for those that may be a little bit newer and on the agent side in the industry. And so I think that's a first place to start. But I'm always available. If somebody wants to shoot me an email, text me, send me whatever it may be, I'm happy to do that on the front end. Hopefully not on the back end. If by that point, we're trying to do damage control maybe. But we're available, and the great thing is we have that team of 22 inspectors who have done, I think we're over 100,000 inspections now as a company.
Wow.
So, and they have a synergy.
Just here in the valley?
Yeah, here in the valley.
Oh, wow.
And so because of that, they interact and share. We have an application that we use where they're on the daily sharing what they see, sharing what they find, asking questions with each other. And so that knowledge base is just, it's unbelievable what these guys bring to the table, with their years of experience, and it's great to watch. So
let's go.
I have a question. So I know you talked a little bit about the warranties, but I heard something about you guys do pre-listing inspections.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So in some cases, and maybe not as prevalent right now, where sellers are more like, hey, take it or leave it. In some cases, but we do have quite a few sellers that will say, hey, just give me an idea of what I might expect on an inspection if it comes through, and with that, we're going to do it just like any other inspection that we do. However, with the caveat that if another inspector from another firm comes through, or even from our firm, you may not see the exact same inspection, or same exact items, maybe worded the same way, but at least gives them a starting point to say, hey, here's the big ticket items, right? Your roof's 22 years old, that may come up. Your plumbing's from 1952, and it gives them a little bit of a decision on, do I take the time to repair some of these things or get them off the list? But at the same time, we have to be mindful of if some owner or some sellers decide to start fixing things themselves, that may cause more issues as an inspector comes through and says, hey, this wasn't, this was done by, Joe.
Steve Valentine.
Steve Valentine. I don't know what your abilities are, so
They are.
I'm with you.
You
on
got
that,
to remember,
so.
my wife's the general contractor. I don't have any tools.
So, but
that's
yeah,
something that's good to know. I mean, that could be advantageous to do something like that. So, yeah.
So I think, without question, the issue for me is presentation. The way the inspector presents the information, I mean, it is what it is. Either the roof's bad or something. I know I do a lot of relocation business, people from Illinois, and I always hear, well, an attorney's going to go through this, right? I'm like, no, an attorney's not going to go
right.
through this.
That's funny that you say that. We were at a conference a couple weeks ago in Indiana, and I met an inspector from Illinois, and he was talking about that whole process of, well, the attorneys have to review it before it goes through the process, and I thought that was fascinating. So once again, it goes back to different individuals from different states have different ideas of what to expect, in the inspection process. So
it's my big thing, because you're either a judicial or a non-judicial state. We're non-judicial. Illinois is a judicial. So these people come down and they're like, okay, when's the attorney look at everything? I'm like, they're looking at it. Me and the title company are the ones that are covering your ass. So yeah, that's a big thing in the Midwest. People are like, well, wait, are these inspectors attorneys? No, they're inspectors.
Right.
So it's totally different.
I'm going to keep all my attorney comments to myself.
and we're
it's hard.
Yeah.
It's like, and then I tell people, you see how thick this contract is? That's why.
Yeah.
That's why. So let's talk a little bit, Steve, if I can, talk a little bit about, because you've done so much business and so much business with Advance. Let's talk a little bit about presentation, because it's really key, especially when, did you say you have 22?
Yeah, 22 inspectors.
So to me, if I've got an out-of-state client that's buying down here, I know that when I tell them, look, you see this tile roof? The tiles aren't really doing anything.
Yep.
It's what's underneath
Paper.
it. They're like, wait a minute, so it's hard for them to grasp. So I will tell the inspectors I work with, say, hey, look, they're from Illinois, so you might need to go through how the roof works and how the underlayment is important and stuff like that. And I'm not telling them what to say, I'm just telling them they're not educated on certain things like that. Can you talk a little bit about that? And
Well,
your
I think
experiences?
the presentation is one thing, but it's what I've learned, which it's really not just recent, but probably 5 or 6 years ago. You rely so heavily, you get a contract, everybody's excited, but you don't set the expectations even before you write a contract. So we're real big on going through the purchase contract with a buyer before they ever go out and look at houses. One of the reasons is you go out and look at houses, now it's emotional, and then you're sticking all this documentation in front of them and you haven't had a chance to go through it. So, we point out the inspection period and what it's really for. The greatest way I know how to explain it from my automotive days is, hey, we're buying a used house, which is like buying a used car, and you're going to take it to a mechanic, which is why we're bringing in a home inspector. And you're going to have some worn out tires, you're going to need some, fluids changed, you're going to need some stuff. Like, you need to expect those things. We're really looking for some major things, and then it's asking the question, is there anything in your past experience of owning a home or anything that really concerns you or stands out? Because I want to make sure and address those things ahead of time. Which, you do get a contract. You can look at the seller disclosure statement in most cases before your inspection and go, well, the roof is 15 years old. Maybe I should get a roofer out there so that you're not on this time crunch. And right now, like you said, the inspectors are under time crunches. The inspection periods seem almost too short right now because everybody's so backed up, and then trying to get a contractor to come out and look at it in the same time. Good luck. 10 days just... up in Munns Park, we're going
days in your
we're going to 12 and 15 day inspection periods because we can't get inspectors there inside 10 days. There's just not enough people doing it. So I think more importantly than just the presentation of the inspection is that if the expectations are set up, like, hey, we've done all these inspections, you can expect, some roof stuff, you can expect these things, so that they don't get overwhelmed when they go through a potential 30-page report. A lot of that stuff is for your knowledge that, hey, you're going to have to budget for these things. Nothing's falling apart, just like a used car. Hey, it's got 100,000 miles on it. It might last 10 years before, or 10 months before the motor goes out. Just be aware of it. And so I think that that's more important than anything, because once you've set those expectations, you're not going into, so many people like, okay, so we found a house, we're all excited, and the home inspector is like, oh my God, the house is falling apart, and what are we going to do? You have no way to go back and recover from that versus if you did it beforehand. And
timing, it's all about timing.
Well,
Right.
we talk about how important the whole buyer presentation is. So, that's just part of the whole buyer presentation. So not only you can expect what happens, explain the contract, but explain the whole process. So from the time that they're pre-qualified till the time the contract's accepted, till the inspection is done, till they're out of underwriting, all the way through closing. So I think it's important that you do that you set that expectation up front.
Look, I honestly tell my buyers up front, here's what the Binzer looks like, for those new people, a buyer inspection notice. Don't put that on Facebook. What is this, please? Please. It's in a way that I present it like, hey, we're into the inspection, and the only thing I want to know is if you want to move forward or not, yes or no, the way it stands. If it's no, okay, let's talk about what the concerns are. If it's yes, I'm good with the way it stands, then we can go through and ask for some things, and whatever we get out of that is going to be a bonus, especially in a seller's market. But it's having the conversation, do you want to walk or do you want to keep it? Because that's gonna determine how we negotiate through the rest of it.
It's vital.
Yeah.
People under-evaluate your initial meeting with a buyer. It's so important to cover the process. And you brought up a really good point. So you start throwing around COE and Binzer and Spuds and all this stuff, And people will not stop you and say, wait a minute, what's a SPUDS? So it's my practice to spell everything out until they go, yeah, I got that. You know, COE is going to be, honey, what's COE? You know, it's like, oh, let me explain. And that's so important in your initial meeting with the buyer. Let me explain the process to you. And don't assume that they've sold or bought a house in the last 5 years, because even if they have, they don't do this every day. We do it every day. It's so important to set expectations and timing. That's a great
You
point.
also assume, you know, I just worked with a client recently from California that, you know, guy's 40 years old, he's super successful, you know, great entrepreneur, guy's never bought a house. So it's like working, you know, with that first time homebuyer, no matter what level of playing field they're on, you have to treat them and ask them, what's your past experience? Oh, you've never bought one. Then I need to walk you through this more. Like, this is the inspection, this is what it's gonna look like. We have, you know, I always explain to people, it's getting the contract negotiated, and then the real fight starts, because now we have inspections and appraisals. And those are things that are actually almost worse than the contract, if you ask me.
You no longer are in control.
Nope.
You're no longer in control.
Here comes the variables.
Yep. You're in control up until the contract's
It would be
accepted.
awesome if we could do an inspections and appraisals before we negotiated the contract.
It would change everything.
That would
Especially
be
in this
awesome.
market.
Yeah.
Especially in this market.
Talk about how Advantage has adapted. I mean, COVID's here, right? And it's not going away anytime
Yeah, where's your
soon.
mask?
Yeah, right. Maybe I should. Yeah, but can you talk a little bit about how the company has adapted because of it?
Yeah, you know, I think just like everybody else, when you know this started back in March and April, nobody knew what to expect. You know, and you know, fortunately, you know, we were in a position to adapt quickly, and you know, we did just like everybody else. I think see a bit of a decline in those first few months, and so we had to say, okay, what's this gonna look like long term? And fortunately, you know, things have gone very, very well from a volume standpoint. We've had to move and adapt from, you know, our office staff who does all of our scheduling and bump that up, as well as adding, you know, an inspector to make sure we're you know, have the coverage that we need. But you know, you get down into you hear things. Our guys encounter things when it comes to homes and what people are willing to do. I think the owner-occupied or even tenant-occupied homes that we're having to inspect, I think that's been a big number in comparison to years past. And so you have to be sensitive and mindful about going into those homes. You know, I got one the other day that said, you know, as it relates to the buyer even being able to get a contractor out there to look at anything or fix something, she said, hey, the seller wasn't even willing to let a contractor come back in to fix something because of COVID. They were concerned about it. So that was a new one for us, and you know, how you know, we had to kind of address that and say, well, that wasn't necessarily our involvement, but you know, she's expressing all these things to us, and so you every day there's something different as it relates to COVID, but luckily it hasn't been so overwhelming that we're still operating at full capacity, and
We're gonna get
done
through
with
this.
that.
You know,
Yeah, we are
everybody's
getting through it.
adapting. We'll get through it. I want to throw something out that what you said, Steve. My brother just bought a house up in Denver, $1 million house, master's degree, super smart kid. He's really good at what he does. But I talked to him more in the past 45 days than I've talked to him in the past 45 years. I mean, it's like every day he's calling Johnny, what does this mean, or what is? And it was all based on the inspection.
Wow.
And some of them trip me up because it's a little different up in Colorado, because it was a pipe issue and pipes freeze up there and you don't hear. So yeah, there's so many different things that can pop up that you just don't know. And we have to be the educators. We have to be.
You have to be the educator, not the expert, right? You know, because when we get into it, sometimes I have a hard time, although it's part of the experience that I bring to the table because of the amount of homes that we've renovated, because my wife's a general contractor, and what I've seen in the last 20 years, there's a lot of education that I kind of bring to the table about the knowledge of cost and having those reliable contractors. And I think that that's a really hard part to do for somebody that's newer in the business or hasn't had the experience because they don't know how to guide. Because that's, I mean, let's be honest, every time we're in inspection, how much is that going to cost? Just say, I don't know. If you don't know, don't guess. It was one of those things my dad taught me early on. Just say, I don't know, and figure it out later, but don't pretend.
Right. Simple stuff like carpet. Figure $2-3 a foot, you're going to be pretty close.
More like 4.
Figure $18 a foot.
It's actually
my commission. And
actually some of the conversation that I've had, and I think it depends too, right? And this comes with experience. Most of the valley, pretty standard construction, but now I'm watching. I've expanded my business into Munns Park in northern Arizona, and especially in Munns Park, I started telling people before the inspections, like, just so you know, Munns Park has its own building code, because stuff is like, there's piers that aren't level, and there's all these weird things that you don't see down here. But then you've got agents coming from the valley to go sell up there, and they're like, well, what do we do with the pier? What does this look like? What is winterization? And it's interesting to see that presentation part of when you go into that different market, like you talk about Denver, pipes freezing, propane, all those different things.
Right.
So,
yeah, it all changes.
yeah.
So, I got a couple of funny stories, inspector funny stories, and I'm sure you probably have a handful, and I know you have some. I had an inspection at a house one time, and the attic access was in their 13-year-old son's room. So the folks that, this is good. So you know where this is going.
I already know where this is going.
So the folks that own the house never stored anything in the attic. So when they went to move, they didn't figure there was nothing up there. Inspector comes and he's doing the inspection. There was 6 boxes of porn collection.
Oh boy.
From the 13-year-old. That was a good one. And the inspector came down and goes, "You're not going to believe what I just found." I was like, yeah, I probably believe it. So I know you got some. Mike, you got to have a couple.
I don't
You
know.
probably have something
I'll
you
tell you a
can't
funny
say.
story. It has to do with the attic, access to the attic, but it's not really an inspection story. I was in Oklahoma and I was helping, I was younger at the time, but I was babysitting some kids they were friends of the family, and they had this secret wall in the master that you could slide and would go into the attic. Well, I didn't know this, and these kids were playing this game with me, and they kept disappearing. And I'm like, where the heck are these kids going, And so one time when I was chasing them, that wall was just open a crack. I'm like, oh, those little, and I slid it open, walked through, and I fell straight through the attic thing, landed on the garage floor, and I'm like, oh, you guys are gonna die. And I'm surprised I didn't die from that whole thing, but that was my only attic access that I actually fell through it and landed on the garage floor.
Okay, so if there's one thing from an inspector standpoint, if there's one thing that realtors could help do to help the whole process go well, what's the 1 or 2 most important things that realtors can do to help with this process?
I think
whether it's buyer or seller side.
Yeah, no, I think by far agents do a wonderful job of, like you said, knowing their client, figuring out the inspection report, going through that. However, I think when we talk about our inspectors try and find that balance at the end of the inspection and the wrap up, and saying, hey, I'm not going to try and scare you or tell you every little detail that's wrong with this home, but I'm going to hit those highlights, and so sometimes that translates not only for buyers but even sometimes agents. They take that verbal information and put a lot of confidence in that. Okay, that's it, right? And I've had too many occasions where either the buyer or the agent or both never even read the report.
Yeah.
And per the Arizona standards and statutes, what we put in writing is what sticks and what stands, right? So while it may be boring to read, while it may be lengthy at times, there's a lot of great information in there, and we put it in red, we'll highlight it in yellow, we'll do, hey, you need to take care of this, or this is just an observation. But taking that time, and it may, that 30 minutes that you spend on that with your client will, I think, not only save you from an issue down the road, but save your client from an issue down the road. And all too often I get that call from the agent, not even the buyer themselves, saying, hey, we've got a problem, and the inspector didn't say this in his wrap up, and I go and look at the report and it's right there. It's there, and so that's probably the biggest advice, is just take that time to read it, review it, act on it if needed, and know what your buyer is looking for. I mean, I've had buyers that they'll call me about a crack in the tile, and I go look at the report, and it's got HVAC problems, electrical problems, plumbing, and they're more concerned about that cracked tile which is a cosmetic issue, than all the major big ticket items in their home. So you kind of have to know.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
I think that a lot of you guys have heard me say this, is that sometimes we get this hero complex going into, like, we're trying to save the transaction, we're trying to show the buyers our knowledge and our things, rather than my big thing that I've changed all my presentations around is that I'm the guide on the journey. I want to get you from point A to point B by asking the right questions. When we get done with an inspection, I always ask the buyers what their concerns are, not what mine are, and here's why. I'm not concerned about an HVAC unit because I know what it costs to replace it, and I know what my budget is, I know what my income is. I want to know what concerns them, like you just said. The tile might be the biggest concern because they might have a brother that can do HVAC, they might have a roofer, but that is a concern. So don't interject your concerns of the report or the inspector's opinion until you ask the buyer, like, hey, what are your concerns with everything? Go home, read the report, you tell me your concerns, and then we'll draft an opinion or a BINSR based on that, not on mine. So I think that that's really important.
I agree with that.
But if your buyer turns that around and says, hey, you've looked at the report, I'm moving here from scrub, what concerns do you have? I think you need to be honest with them and say,
but
this
you
concerns me a little
you
bit.
can't address the concern. Yeah, you can, but again, it depends on why is that concerning to you. Here's the major things that I see, but I always like to see where they're coming from first before I go.
Without question.
Yeah, 'cause, I mean, you've probably seen realtors that try to convince that the report's not that bad, and I think it needs to be addressed. What are their concerns? That's the absolute best way to approach it.
Yeah.
It's just, what bothers you about this inspection? Then you can talk about it. Then you can even get other people out to give them more information if that's what they needed. So if it was a slab crack or something, you can get another expert out to take a look at it and get more information.
Well, and sometimes we speak out of turn, for agents. The minute you start throwing up during the inspection, the buyer may not be concerned with anything, but now you've thrown up all over the place and you're concerned with it, so now they're concerned with it.
Yeah.
And so we need to let the buyers kind of work through it with us on that.
Yeah, it's a fine line because you have a responsibility to your clients. So yeah, that's a fine line. Talk to me a little bit. I haven't used you guys, so I have not seen your reports. Talk to me a little bit about your report and how it's user friendly for someone that doesn't maybe not a mechanical mind, or
and
talk to us a little bit. Is there a summary at the beginning of stuff that's a concern before you go into the full-fledged
So
report?
our summary is typically the end. However, on the front end, it's basically what to expect and directions on how to read the report. If it's hey, attention, this needs to be looked at. It's there's basically a table of contents that will tell you what everything means at that point. And the good news is this is reporting that's been 32 years in the making. And after hey, this phrase or this terminology is very geared towards what the state requirements are for home inspectors. Let's make sure it's worded in a way that is clear. We have a vast library of comments that from, like I said, the thousands and thousands of inspections that we've done, to where we're not necessarily having to create something new every time. And so it really does say, okay, this is a problem that we've seen before, we can insert it in the report. For all intents and purposes, it is, it's divided into those major areas that you talked about, the plumbing, electrical, HVAC, we go into kitchens, bathrooms, and so each section has its area, and if it's a problem, you'll see it in red, you'll see it in bold, you'll see it in all caps, you'll see it highlighted in yellow. Steve probably knows what I'm talking about, but and that's what we want,
I'm
right?
just laughing because I remember when the reports were carbon copy, and you guys had to pass a penmanship test to work for Dave. And you guys would sit there and write all that stuff out at the end of it. There was no pictures, there was nothing but handwritten comments and check boxes.
Wow.
And then we'd have to go home and fax that through a thermal fax machine to somebody.
What's a fax?
Right.
Yeah.
I hate your fax number. No.
So how often would you say, so you see all the reports that come through, how often would you say you see something that's different at this point, after all these reports?
There's I would say daily, and I mentioned that application that our inspectors use. I'm on there, and it is amazing what these guys find. Some of you talk about stories, we go on for days, but the things that they find, we have one inspector in particular that he is like, if there's something weird, he finds it. It's always him, and they tease him about it, but over the years, somebody owns a home and they think they're a do-it-yourselfer, and they'll, we had one where we had a garage where, the step in the garage that usually people stop their car on, the guy had cut out 2 slots for his pickup truck to be able to fit in, and cut the.
And it was a post-tension slab.
Yeah, right? So you see crazy things, and where, like I said, they share that information, and so not only if one inspector finds it, now 21 others have seen, hey, this is something odd, or
There's a reason I asked it. I mean, just when you think you've seen everything, something else is going to pop up.
It's like a real estate transaction.
Right.
They're all different. I mean, there's always some twist or turn, and nothing's ever the same.
I read something about Request Builder.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so we have I'm not sure of the best terminologies, but it's a product or application that the owner David has been working on for several years, which basically makes that Binzer process just super clean, super easy, where you can take information from the report itself and populate it into the Binzer without having to try and let's pick and choose. You still can pick and choose, but it really simplifies the process.
I'm just laughing, like that's amazing, because for all the agents that write in the Binzer, please repair all items on summary.
Yeah.
What? What is that?
There's nothing pisses me off more.
Is that lazy?
Please see inspection report and repair all.
Right.
It's like,
It's 38 pages
how
long.
lazy are you? I mean, really, how
That's a
lazy
big
can
We're
you
not
way
trying
to
to
get a rejection.
abbreviate in there, like they try to,
Right.
so you still can't really understand what they're asking for because they try to abbreviate things.
But it's like they go into like fixed lines 1, 2, 8, 9, 11, 12, 13, 19, and 20. And then you're like, well, where's the stuff that goes with this?
Yeah.
Unbelievable. It's
So,
unbelievable.
Yeah, it really streamlines and clarifies, exactly what's in the report is going to show up on the Binzer, almost a copy and paste, and it's a great tool. I mean, and
Very cool tool.
we did it, and David did it to ensure that it made agents' lives easier, and ultimately, if it came back to us ever, that it was all there. So
Can you maybe send a sample of that to Kelly that she could send out to everybody? I'd be interested in seeing that.
Yeah,
That's cool.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Cool. So, right now, what would you guys say? Steve was talking about the inspection period being 10 days. You guys obviously have a big crew. How far out are you guys on inspections right now? I mean, if we went under contract today, we got a 10-day inspection period.
He's got a 7-day close of escrow.
Oh, and by the way, it's cash and we're closing in 5 days.
yeah, no, I would say that's one of the things that we have to offer is not only we have have made some changes, and this goes back, I think, even to pre-COVID, but in addition to our regular scheduling hours, we're 24/7 for all intents and purposes. So if you want to go online and submit that, there's a text option. That we have an after hours, staff that helps address those. So we're taking calls on the weekend. We're taking them and we're getting that schedule,
Wow, that's
in place.
fantastic.
So we
after
really,
hours and weekends.
yeah, and I'll look at the schedule and think, man, we're maxed out. But guys will open up their schedule. They're looking at it and saying, hey, let's make sure we can accommodate, buyers and agents, and so we have the capacity to do what needs to be done, and sometimes a day or two's notice we can get out there and get it taken care of.
So I got a couple of things on that too that kind of goes along with setting expectations. So what are you guys, I don't know because I haven't looked at them in a while, like what's the average price point of an inspection without a pool right now? Because I think some agents are like underquoting, and then the buyers are getting, they're like, wait, it was only
Is
supposed
that
to be.
square footage thing? Is there a full
Yeah,
one?
so what happens is when a buyer or an agent calls in for the inspection, our office staff has a
Cheat sheet.
a cheat sheet basically that has square footage ranges. It also has the age of the home. That comes into play. If you've got a 1950s, 60s, even now doesn't seem like it's that long ago, but even in the 70s and even 80s, where we've got 30-year-old houses, 40-year-old houses that we've got to take some extra time, and so I think as it relates to the inspection itself, square footage, I think our average is in the 400 range, depending on year, size.
Like what's a baseline if the buyer's like, hey, minimum inspection is going to be about $400-$450, and then you can add on to it from that.
Yeah, if you go termite and pool, those are obviously, there's that extra cost there, but I'd say for a normal 1,500 square foot home, you're in that 320 to 350 range, and then you add on termite and there's age things. So yeah,
Here's the other thing I'm going to bring up that I think is really important for the older homes, and I think you guys do it or have a sub that does it, is, we've been burned pretty bad on some of our renovations with sewer lines.
Yeah.
So, we have a must with our clients, like 75 and older, the sewer's got to be scoped. It's $225, and I can't tell you, well, it would have saved me from being sued more than once. But it's also one of those things that it's also saved our clients from some pretty big issues.
Yeah.
That, again, the seller now knows it, they've got to disclose it, so it's one of those things that can kind of be negotiated through. So you guys, what are your recommendations on that?
So we as far as performing those as a company, we do not perform those from an Advantage standpoint. However, we partnered up with 911 Plumbing that does all of our sewer scans, and so they'll get in there, they do that video sewer scope. They'll either go up through a clean out, sometimes a toilet, sometimes a vent stack up on the roof. But it is vital, and in fact, I went to lunch with those guys a couple weeks ago, and some of the stuff that they find, they'll be going through and it'll go from pipe to mud, all of a sudden.
Pipe to outhouse.
Right, and so when that happens, obviously, those are those big ticket items that are, hey, we're cutting up the slab, we're going, you're not living in the house for, a year, and so those are the big things that really can come back to bite a buyer, and so I agree with you 100%.
It's ridiculously expensive, and I'll tell you where, it was a couple of years ago we started doing it where we just set it in place with my staff, like if this, then that, the buyers need to be recommended, because I don't want the call afterwards like this is happening. We've had that a couple of times, but we had, it amazes me, people that are flipping homes, they won't take a little bit. Like we do inspections when we buy a house, like after we close on it, because normally it's a quick thing, but I want to know where it's at before I go through and do a bunch of work. And the sewer line, like, oh my gosh, this client that we inherited after he did the renovation. So this is probably the worst story, and it comes with the inspection to boot. Bought the house with a partner. He's in California, runs some big company. His partner out here never put insurance on the house. He owned it free and clear, it burned to the ground.
Wow.
Okay.
Whoa. That's insurance.
No. So he gets stuck. He gets stuck rebuilding the house. So The house is its slab. It's built in 1968 in Tempe. They get all done, spends a couple $100,000, looks great. We get the home inspection. Guess what? The sewer's collapsed all the way throughout the house. So we have to go back in, cost him 20 grand
Yep.
Wow.
to go pull out tile, move the kitchen back, and cut everything up for a $225 scope.
Yep.
$225 is so cheap. Like all the inspections that people forego to not know, especially when you're doing
Yeah.
cosmetics, it just.
Let me ask you this real quick. So if let's say you've got a good smart realtor and he knows there's histories.
Oh, I gotta go.
Yeah, not including us, obviously. And in the area there's a history of maybe slab leaks or, and I don't know that that's a good example, but let's just say there's a history of certain things in the
History
area.
of polybutylene.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know,
No, and that's
and the realtor says, hey, we'd really like you to make sure, my client really wants to know about this. Can realtors ask for that when they request the?
Oh, absolutely. And as it relates to the history and even, from a SPUD standpoint, if that seller knows that there's a history there, and the other good news is, and I was amazed, in going out, and doing, my side-by-side parallels with some of these inspectors, that these guys have done it for so long, and they know certain parts of the valley that, okay, this builder during this time frame had this issue.
Yep.
And they have that in their, experience, and that is critical. So they'll know before they even, show up to the house that,
Yep.
that this, the likelihood is that it may be a piping issue, or this builder had, all their subs that did the stucco, didn't do on the tops of the pop outs on the windows, or, things like that only through experience you're going to get that. So I think
Lennar did this.
Yep.
D.R. Horton did this.
right, and so that's like I said, when you have that big of a team that's been doing it for so long, it comes in, and then they share that knowledge with the others, and so it works out really well. So.
Cool. So, bottom line is, the inspection's a big part of what we do, and we're always learning stuff. Did you have anything you wanted to add to? You can get a hold of Lisa. We'll get her information on.
Did we have any
On the
questions
website.
on her?
We got no. Well, the only comment we had was Steve speaking golden knowledge from Gabriel Santillano. That's all we got.
Thanks, Gabe.
We got no questions.
Shout out.
I think that's about it. Anything? Do you want to add anything? You can join us over here.
Sure, I'll come back.
This is Lisa. This is our rep. By the way, I should mention. My home group goes through a pretty serious vetting process before they let anybody in to be a power partner. I believe we have 2 inspection companies that are power partners. They've been carefully chosen to be power partners. So, that speaks a lot to you guys to even be in the mix. So if you had anything you wanted to add, please.
I guess agents always ask me, well, why should I pick Advantage? There's so many inspection companies out there. And I would have to say it's because we're better than we were a year ago, and we will be better a year from now. I mean, it's a constant moving, growing, learning company, and we've got 32 years behind us, and many more to come. So
One thing I know about Dave is that he's always looking for improvement and being on the forefront. And I don't know if most of you guys know, but Dave was one of the front runners and the leaders behind the industry being licensed, which you're grateful for, because I remember an inspection years ago before people were licensed, and here comes Billy Bob with his Jeep and a step ladder, and he gets out and he's like, so my inspection, we won't mention anything that's less than $1,000 worth of repair. I'm like, well, who's the judge of that? Right? So that was, the licensing was a big thing that really helped kind of keep people away from just fly-by-night inspections.
I heard it's a legit licensing program too.
Oh yeah, you guys have to do how many hours of inspections before you can do it on your own? It's worse than a driver's license.
Yeah, so as far as the actual parallels goes, it's 30 parallel inspections, not in addition to the education and the the actual exam. So it's pretty rigorous.
So
and
figure
thorough.
2-3 hours.
So in
4
other
hours
words, it's easier to get a
inspection.
real estate license than it is to be a home inspector.
That's true.
That is true. And I've done both, so I can tell you that is correct. So.
Do you know that to become a haircut, a salon, it takes 5 times the hours it takes to be a realtor.
So I don't know. Well, how long have you been in the business?
100 years back. I took my test in like Morse code.
So do any of you guys remember Cecil Daniels? So he was an instructor here for a long time. He was one that helped formulate like the GRI and the buyer broker and some of that stuff. Funny story about him is he was my neighbor when I was 20. Now at the time I was still a punk, but he lived across the street from my new build. He was like a big overweight Mr. Clean, and he'd walk to the mailbox every day. He was just grumpy. And then when I got my real estate license, my dad's like, you need to go take the GRI class. So I show up, I'm like, shit, he's my neighbor. He's the instructor. But we became really, really good friends. And I'll never forget his buyer broker class. And I've always kept this in the back of my mind is that, you know, he walked in and he said, look, he's like, it takes 3,000 hours to cut somebody's nail and trim somebody's hair and it'll all grow back. And he used a lot of choice swear words. And he says, you idiots in here took 90 hours and you can F up somebody financially.
For life.
For life. And so it was just, he was very big on like going through like that buyer broker class was like 14 hours of trying to get people to understand like what you're actually doing and what you're guiding people through and how important it is that you are, you know, taking on somebody's financial risk down the road and what we do. And
big.
it's just, yeah.
You know, let me piggyback on that. I think we have a Binzer class. John Dyer's Binzer class. It's so misunderstood or something. That's an awesome class, and he talks about the inspection.
Monday at 1.
Pardon me?
Monday at 1.
Monday at 1. That's a great
Zoom.
class. And if you've never taken a John Dyer class, you'll come out of there scared shitless.
That's why I don't take them.
I'm just telling you. He's changed my career. I have a little John Dyer on my shoulder. Every time I'm filling out a contract, you know, his voice in my ear. So that's all we got for the week. Vote.
Yeah,
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. I want to thank
Have a
Steve
great
for his
weekend,
costume
everyone.
this morning. We're
All
out.
right.
All right.
I never know when that last joke's done. Like it's, you know, one more.